What's going on, guys? Welcome to my video today. Today, my video is about telling the truth with the message of the gospel, but doing it with gentleness and respect. So, I want to talk a little bit about a church that I used to go to and the pastor there. And I consider him a friend. He's a friend of mine. I consider him a friend. But this is just some issues, things that I went through that kind of inspired this video. So I no longer go to that church, and I'm going to kind of explain why. I can still consider him a friend, but I just can't go there to that church as him as my pastor. So it got to be, to me, where I felt like most of the messages were not positive messages. They were always condemning others. Now, I don't want to hear a prosperity message. I'm not saying to sugarcoat it, the messages, and not tell the truth. But you know, the messages got to be where they were just basically getting onto the congregation. They're not good enough. He would holler and talk loud. And that's fine if you're going to get excited about Jesus. You know, that stone was rolled back and Jesus came out of that tomb. And, you know, something like that. That's okay. But every week the messages were hollering, basically condemning the congregation. And it got to where my spirit, I just couldn't take it anymore. It would just make me cringe. It just felt so judgmental. It felt so negative. It always just felt like, hey, we're not doing enough. And so I quit going there, and he sent me a message, and he said, you know, whatever I've done to you, I apologize. And I said, you know, it's nothing personal. It's just like, you know, a lot of the hollering and stuff, you know, like my spirit just don't like it. You know, I'm more of a reserved personality. I'm probably more of a Baptist church type person, to kind of be fair. But I mean, I can handle hollering. I can handle speaking in tongues. I can handle, you know, laying on hands and stuff like that. That don't bother me. But, you know, it was just kind of like negative messages. It was not feeding my spirit. It was just like rebuke. I mean, it was like, you know, there's times for that, but there's times for other messages too. So he brought up, you know, so when I tried to start going back a little bit, tried to start going back there after a year or two. And then, like, in one of his messages, he said, yeah, some people has said, you know, about my hollering, about how they feel like I'm hollering at them or whatever. But, and then he kind of started getting loud and kind of, you know, prideful acting. But he said, what you want me to do? Just sit here and read this book and be all quiet? No, that ain't how God made me. I'm a loud person. And he was kind of being prideful, you know, about it. And this kind of leads up, this is all going to lead up to my conclusion. But this kind of all was going to lead up to my conclusion, but I got a few more examples. I caught him on the phone a while back when I started going back to his church, and I was telling him about me going through financial problems, and on the verge of filing Chapter 13, and my wife, you know, I kind of felt like my wife was, you know, spending kind of recklessly. And he didn't really say a whole lot about it on the phone, but then at one of his sermons, he brings up about people struggling financially. I mean, this was like a week or two after this conversation. He says about somebody, about us struggling financially and blaming our spouses, but we're not giving our tithes to God, and kind of getting all loud and kind of like prideful acting, you know. why didn't he say that to me on the phone when I brought that up to him? Why didn't he say that to me as a friend in a gentle way, a loving way, and say, hey, I know you're struggling with your finances. I know it's hard to kind of tithe when, it seems like you don't have that extra money to tithe, but, have you considered that maybe God would bless you and help you more if you would tithe? You say that in a gentle and loving way, not really say anything, and then when you get up at the pulpit, when you have the mic and the other person can't respond back, and it's like you're making little jabs at them and saying things that they come to you in private as a friend. You don't always need a pastor. Sometimes you need a friend. You need somebody to talk to. You don't want to feel judged, and you don't want to feel condemned, and you sure don't want to hear it when you go the next Sunday to church and it gets brought up in a message and you know that it's talking about you. And if it's not talking about just you, you're still included in that. They remember that conversation that they just had with you. They know that that's going to offend you. And so so I think it was that same day. His sermon was about telling the truth and the whole truth, and he kind of implied like to be bold and unapologetic about it, and that's kind of what inspired this message right here. So he apparently doesn't see the wisdom that you can tell the truth and not compromise on the truth or the gospel. Not sugarcoat it. Not say that all people are saved and that hell's not eternal. You don't have to try to sugarcoat it in any kind of way. You can tell the truth, but you can do it with gentleness and respect, like it tells us in 1 Peter 3:15. You're not going to bring anyone to Christ, or you're not going to encourage, or you're not going to help, like even your congregation, people that's already believers. You're not going to edify them and lift them up by having an attitude that you're called by God, and that just because some people compromise the truth, you're going to give the truth and the whole truth, and you're going to do it bold, and you're going to be loud, and you don't care who you offend. And you can't have that attitude. You can't have that judgmental attitude. Before, I used to make conversations with him about stuff. I was talking about the imprisoned spirits when Jesus was crucified, and the time between his crucifixion and his resurrection. It says he went to the imprisoned spirits and made proclamation of his victory. And I was talking about, that the different scholars had a few different theories of who the imprisoned spirits were, and then he kind of he gets offended, and he's like, the imprisoned spirits were the old saints, and he kind of snapped at me and I'm thinking to myself, okay, you got all these scholars, some say this, some think it's this. The Bible isn't really clear on who it is. The Bible doesn't really, you can't tell who it is from Scripture alone, or there would be no debate about it. And so it's like he gets offended because I'm trying to learn, and he feels threatened by what I'm saying. I'm just trying to make conversation. I'm not saying that I'm right, or it wasn't saying that he was wrong. I don't even know if he had gave it. I don't think he even gave his opinion on that. It was just something I just brought up talking about. And it was that moment that then he starts saying that God doesn't have a physical body. I mean, that God has a physical body. And he starts talking about how he appeared to Moses and all. And I start thinking what do you mean God has a physical body? Which this is a kind of little off track right here. But God is a spirit. God is an infinite spirit. God does not have a shape or a form like us. He doesn't weigh anything. He doesn't not have a certain height. You can't measure him in inches. He's an infinite spirit. And you can't take anthropomorphism analogies in the Bible that we can relate to God and take them literal and say that God has a body like us, like in heaven, like he has a body. No, God is an infinite spirit, and he can come in whatever form he wants to. Many times he came in the form of angels in the Old Testament. He can take the shape of a burning bush. He can come in the form of a windstorm or whatever he wants. But God is not a physical body. He can take the form of a physical body. And when I started feeling condemned, then he started teaching this about God having a physical body. I started thinking that was the kind of point when I left there. And that's a little off topic because it's mainly the parts about being judgmental was the point. And, so let me get back to the point. Westboro Baptist Church is this church that's known for being so hateful toward people and preaching. They go to these protests and they hold signs that says God hates fags, which is not true. God hates homosexuality. But a lot of the things, I would say probably the most of the things that they're saying is biblical, and it is true. And they're not sugarcoating it. But when you go tell people that God hates fags, even though that part is not true, but I think it was them that there was a funeral, and it was a gay person. It was their funeral, and they rode by and they hollered out that this person has now been burning in hell for the last 2 days and so hours and so minutes, and hollering that out there like that. Now, do you think, maybe if that person died in their sin without knowing Jesus Christ, that person probably is going to go to hell. I mean, not knowing anything about them, but if they died in their sin and they didn't know Jesus according to the Bible, they're going to go to hell. But is that necessary to holler that out like that? You're never going to bring anyone to Jesus Christ with that kind of attitude. You can tell the truth, and you can tell the whole truth, and you can be bold about it, and you can be unapologetic about it, and you can be brash about it like that to people, and you can be loud. But that is not how you bring people to Jesus Christ. It's the love, it's the gentleness of Christ. In his sermons, he would say all the time, some of us have head knowledge of God, but we don't have heart knowledge. We don't know him in our heart. And that doesn't necessarily mean, but he was talking just about me on that. But I felt like that he kind of was, because I study apologetics and I study the Bible at our church, at that church. And it's a small church, and not a lot of people there are kind of really known for, studying, being like really knowledgeable on the Bible, So I kind of feel like he was making little jabs at me on that. And, I have a lot of work to do with my heart, and I'll admit that. I have anger and resentment sometimes. I have things that I struggle with. I don't keep that a secret. I need Jesus Christ. That's why I'm a Christian, because I realize I'm not good enough on my own. I need Jesus bad. But you're not going to bring anybody to Jesus Christ with that Westboro Baptist Church mentality. Even if you're preaching the truth and the whole truth, and you're not sugarcoating it, and you're thinking that God's so proud of you for going out there and preaching the truth, when you got all these pastors out here that's compromising on these new modern culture and new views, and you think that God's proud of you, the way that you're delivering the message, but you're hurting the kingdom of God. You don't have to lie to people. You don't have to sugarcoat it. You can still tell the truth, but you can do it with love. You can do it with gentleness and respect. Charisma is not a bad thing. Charisma is a good quality if you use it the right way. Joel Osteen would be the most awesome preacher in the world if with his mentality, the way that he approaches it, if he would preach the gospel and not the prosperity gospel, with the way that he approaches it with love and gentleness like that, that would draw so many people to Jesus Christ. Not telling them that they're going to get rich and that God's going to always heal them and remove every bad thing in their life. Giving them the truth of the gospel, but doing it like the way Joel Osteen. That is like the ultimate preacher. Because that hellfire preaching, people's flesh is already hostile to God to begin with. They already love doing their sin. They already don't want to sacrifice their life. They don't want to give up those things and come to God and have to be accountable to God. And so when you approach them with that judgmental mentality, because I can tell you, as a Christian, even as a Christian, I don't like being judged by people. It makes me angry when I feel like I'm being judged by other Christians. Imagine what it is to an unbeliever when they feel judged by Christians. The message should not be one of condemnation. The Father did not send Jesus Christ into this world to condemn the world. So I'm pretty sure he did not send us to condemn the world. Our job is to give the gospel, to give the truth, do not compromise on the truth, but to do it with love and gentleness and respect. That is how you bring people to God. Not with that overbearing, obnoxious, arrogant, loud, judgmental attitude. It takes wisdom to see that. And I lack a lot of other things. And this pastor, which I consider my friend, he can't be my pastor. But he lacks, he talks about my heart with being with God. But one of the main ways that you love God is by loving people. If you love God and you have animosity and bitterness and resentment toward believers or unbelievers or just people in general, that is not honoring God. That is not loving God. The main way that you love God is not just by you have a God all to yourself and then everybody, you don't want to share him with everybody else or anybody else that you feel ain't as close to God or that's making bad choices. You kind of condemn them and look down on them like they're not as good as you are. You got to love people and stop being so judgmental and have compassion for people. This life is a struggle, man. I struggle with so many things. I struggle with anger and resentment. I struggle with like playing video games, with boredom. I get the craving to take pills and stuff like that I used to take. I'm struggling in my marriage and being, so many people in my house and struggling with my stepkids. Man, I get so overwhelmed with life. I get so discouraged sometimes that I don't even feel like I don't even want to live anymore sometimes. I feel like I'm just ready for God to take me. Life's hard. I struggle enough. I don't need somebody else judging me and looking down on me for the struggles that I go through. I need a friend that I can talk to. I need somebody that can tell me the truth, but doing it in a loving way, doing it in privately, not waiting to get to the pulpit and attack me and make little jabs at me and act all arrogant and loud. And, that just, if I wasn't as close to God that I've been, I'm trying to get more close to God now. I have come backslid a little bit from God. I used to be really close to God. I'm honest about this stuff. I do apologetics. I try to bring people to God. I'm not up here trying to say, hey, I'm perfect. I'm this holy man. Be like me. I'm trying to show you I'm a sinner and I struggle like everybody else. But I have experienced Jesus Christ and I have experienced the life of sin. And I can tell you that the life as a Christian, life with God, life with Jesus, even though I still struggle, and we all struggle with our flesh. But anyway, you're never going to reach anyone with that kind of attitude. We are to show, we got to show love and gentleness and respect to people if we're going to bring them to God. We can't have that kind of attitude. You know, naturally that doesn't turn me away from God, my experience at this church with this pastor. It doesn't turn me away from God one bit. I know that didn't have anything to do with God, and I know that God does not like that. But I also know that God has called him and anointed him, and God knows that we are all flesh and that we all struggle, even pastors, and that we can struggle with pride sometimes, which he does, and that we can have methods that are not Christ-like. It's not like God's mad at him for doing that, but God also understands my point. God's going to tell me to forgive him. God's always going to take up for the other person. Like if you come to God against the other person, God's going to make excuses for them, and he's going to take up for them, and he's going to want you to forgive them. If the other person came to God, it would be the same way. He would take up for me and tell them to forgive them. God, God loves both of us. He knows that we both struggle. God also knows the things that I'm talking about is true, and he doesn't expect me to go to that church if I don't want to. But he does want me to forgive him, and he does want me to have wisdom to realize that he's human too. But let's use this as encouragement. Don't give up on God and Jesus Christ because we experience church hurt. Let's realize that we all struggle. Let's forgive. And let's use that as motivation to try to be better. To try to motivate us to be better. And let's go out, use that to motivate us to go out into the world and try to learn from our mistakes and try to learn from the mistakes of people things that we see in people that we don't like. And let's use that to try to better reach the world by showing them the love and the gentleness of Jesus Christ. And that's how we're going to reach the world better. By preaching the truth and not compromising, but doing it in like a Joel Osteen type way. When you come off as arrogant and loud and obnoxious and judgmental, it pushes people away from God. And it's hard to get them to ever come back. And when people experience church hurt, it's hard to get them back in church. Anyway, just something for y'all to think about. Maybe it encouraged somebody. Thanks for watching my videos, guys. I got more videos coming. I got all kinds of ideas for videos that I'm going to put out there.